Thanks for being here this morning. I've heard over the weeks and past many months from our city's residents and businesses in the area who have been struggling with crime throughout Salt Lake City neighborhoods. And I've seen the data that proves that frustration and the legitimacy of it. I felt that frustration myself. And I share the concerns about the impacts on our community, on the quality of life of our residents and our ability for our local businesses to flourish and feel safe. I know that our police officers also, who work every single day to try to keep our streets safe, share in the frustration of our residents and of City Hall. So as a city, we've been exploring new pathways and new approaches to partnership to ensure that our police department has the support that it needs to be able to keep our neighborhoods safe, keep our residents, keep our businesses, and keep our visitors safe here in Salt Lake City. And in doing so, through these partnerships and these new pathways, we will not sacrifice the values that we have as the capital city, the values of equity and access to opportunity for all who seek it, every resident, housed and unhoused. To the contrary, the apex criminals that we will target with the actions and the partnerships you're about to hear from, they too often prey upon those who are historically disadvantaged. We will not stand by and allow our residents to continue to be victimized by people who should not be free to roam our city streets. I am happy to be here today alongside Chief Brown, as well as U.S. Attorney John Huber, Utah Public Safety Commissioner Jess Anderson, and U.S. Marshal Matt Harris. These are our statewide partners, and you'll hear from them in that order. They're our partners in public safety, and together we're launching a multifaceted effort to reduce crime across Salt Lake City. We will be surgical in our approach to identify the perpetrators in the city who are committing serious federal crimes that threaten others, such as drug distribution and weapons charges. And we're going to ensure that they face the appropriate consequences. Their criminal activity is not welcome in Salt Lake City. Every city's fundamental job is to ensure that its residents, its businesses, and its visitors are safe each and every day. And increases in violent and property crime in Salt Lake City, increases in our calls for service, and a growing number of people experiencing homelessness being concentrated in Salt Lake City and preyed upon by the criminal elements are being coupled with jail restrictions. And this has brought the need for a collaborative approach with these multi-jurisdictional partners who stand with me today. In asking Chief Brown to convene this group of experts, my priority is that our police officers are supported with the tools and the resources they need to do that critical and fundamental work of keeping our city safe. The 2021 Public Safety Plan, which you'll hear more about next from Chief Brown, is the outcome of focused work by Chief Brown and his team to outline the ways Salt Lake City Police Department plans to leverage new tools and new partnerships to address increases in crime. And we are committing to you today that we will reconvene this group along with any potential future partners on a quarterly basis to publicly recap the work for you that's been done and what's to come next. So I thank you, Chief, for your work on this plan. Thank you to our law enforcement officers for the good work that they do every day. And thank you to our partners who are as invested in keeping our city safe as we are. We will hear from the speakers, as I mentioned, and then open it up for questions at the end. Chief Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. There has been a lot of talk about the 21% increase in violent crime that Salt Lake City has seen in 2020. While that percentage is stark and it's alarming, that number itself is not how anyone in front of you sees or views what has occurred in 2020. What we see is 287 loved ones, mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, who have been victimized. It doesn't sit well with the community, we know that. It doesn't sit well with the Salt Lake City officers, and it doesn't sit with any of us standing here today. Our officers describe what they call a revolving door at the jail. Let me explain. I'm going to put up a graphic so you large guys. This graphic behind me is just one example of probably hundreds that has repeatedly happened over the course of 2020 as the Salt Lake City PD has dealt with COVID-19. This individual, in 8 months' time, was booked into the jail 9 times. Of those 9 arrests, they were released through pretrial services the very same day. The most time they spent in jail for any of those arrests was 5 days. We can do better. If you can imagine, if at any one point in those arrests this individual was held, how many victims would we have prevented to being subjected to crime? We'll make that graphic, we'll hand that out at the end. So this is how it goes. Someone reports a crime in our community. Our officers respond, they locate the offender, they arrest the subject, and they book them into jail, only to have them released within hours. Many times before the officers have completed their reports or they have ended their shifts. This happens frequently enough that these repeat offenders have become known to our officers by name. These offenders know that there is no accountability for their criminal behavior. Doing the same thing repeatedly and expecting different results does not work. In fact, that's the definition of insanity, and it's a sign that the system should be improved. This 2021 Public Safety Plan is how we plan to address these issues. Today I'm joined with leaders within that system, partners who are committed to helping those that have already been victimized, but more importantly, keeping others from becoming victims as well. It's important that we curb this increased victimization within our community. Our partnerships with the U.S. Attorney John Huber. Our partnership with the Department of Public Safety, Commissioner Jess Anderson. Our partnership with the U.S. Marshal's Office, U.S. Marshal Matthew Harris, are not new, but how we implement this alliance will be. Coordinating and working with the U.S. Marshals and the U.S. Attorneys, we will seek out those high-risk, top-tier offenders with outstanding warrants, and we will follow through with prosecutions of new crimes, ensuring that they are not left unchecked in our community. This effort will result in fewer criminals and fewer people being victimized. Street racing out in the Northwest Quadrant has been a huge impact upon our community and those businesses throughout the year of 2020. Many times there are hundreds and hundreds of individuals, participants, following these street crimes. This leads to criminal activities such as shootings, DUIs, drug use, vandalism, sexual assaults, and assaults. These are becoming more problematic within our city and across the state. I've talked with Commissioner Anderson, and we're going to form a task force to address street racing and the crimes that follow them. Internally, we are redirecting some of our resources to patrol to provide better response to calls for service, as well as allowing officers to be present in their beats, something that has been proven to reduce crime. We will continue our community engagement and outreach to obtain resources for those in need, as many of these issues we respond to each day cannot be addressed by police alone. These are just a few of many changes we are making to provide better service to everyone in our community. Make no mistake, we are united to bring criminals to justice and to bring justice for those that have been victimized. If you commit a crime in Salt Lake City, we will do everything in our power to hold you accountable. It's through these partnerships that our goal to make Salt Lake City an even better place can be accomplished. We have a long history of partnering with these agencies who have joined me today. And gentlemen and Mayor, thank you for stepping forward to face this new challenge. I'll now turn the time over to U.S. Attorney John Huber.
Public safety is an issue upon which we can all agree. Without public safety, we don't have commerce or business. We don't have health care. We don't have services to the needy. And aspirations we have to either hold up ourselves as an Olympic city or aspire to once again host an Olympic event. We cut ourselves short if we cannot provide public safety to our own citizens and constituents, to our visitors engaged in tourism, to all the people who visit the beautiful capital city of Salt Lake City. If we cannot provide a safe environment, so many other things fail. So in our capital city, under the leadership of Mayor Aaron Mendenhall, we're at a critical point where lawlessness has beget lawlessness. That axiom rings true, that when we cannot hold accountable those who violate the rules and mores of our society, then we fall as a society and we falter. Unlawful conduct without consequence exacerbates street crime challenges in Salt Lake City. The corollary is also true. That is order. Public order fosters success in every aspect of our life. Today's partnership, which really is historic, and we may have a cynical approach to this and say we've heard it, we've seen it before, but we have never stood together like this. Under the leadership, the strong leadership of Aaron Mendenhall, our Salt Lake City Mayor, the Police Chief, the Commissioner of the Utah State Department of Public Safety, the United States Marshal, presidentially appointed, and the United States Attorney, we've never stood together like this. This is an historic moment. Today is a direct result, and as the Mayor did tip her hat to her constituents, let me do as well. Today is a direct result of the advocacy of the Pioneer Park Coalition, who contacted me directly in late fall of 2020 to express their concerns and help bring notice to me, if I hadn't noticed already, the street crime issue and the public safety issues we have in our capital city. They held a virtual forum last month on public safety where a number of us here spoke. And it was a successful event that led to this partnership between Salt Lake City and the other partners we have up here with us today. Through a revitalized Project Safe Neighborhoods, which you should recognize if you've been reporting for some time, this has been around and has transcended multiple presidential administrations. It's a proven model because we can all agree on public safety. Project Safe Neighborhoods, it will be revitalized this year, as the Chief has explained, in Salt Lake City at a historic level of commitment from all of the key stakeholders. We have enjoyed great success with this model in Utah and throughout the nation. Most recently, after 2.5 years of hard work and partnership just like this in Ogden City, we, the Mayor, the Police Chief, stood and reported at the end of last year up to a 30% decrease in crime in the downtown Ogden area. And they give great credit to the partnership of Project Safe Neighborhoods. We will replicate that here as it makes sense under the Mayor's leadership, and we will be good and flexible partners to Salt Lake City. Based on our experience in the U.S. Attorney's Office and in federal law enforcement with our state and local partners, it's also corroborated by social scientists that a very few number, a small percentage of offenders are responsible for the majority of our crime. Some scientists suggest that 7% is responsible for 50% or more of the crime that occurs on our streets. From our experience, that rings true. If we can find those 7%, those apex criminals or chronic offenders or high-risk violent offenders, if we can find them and hold them accountable with meaningful justice in the United States courthouse, the federal courthouse here in Salt Lake City, crime will go down in our beautiful capital city. It's proven, and we have high confidence and optimism that in 2021 and following, that we can achieve goals that we have set out and that we represent here today. Well, where do we start? Where do you start to find those types of offenders who are preying upon the homeless, who are responsible for the senseless homicides in Salt Lake City and the state of Utah? We read the same articles that you print, and mentioned Pat Reevy's work and his partners at Deseret News annually with their homicide summary. Last year was a terrible year. Amongst all the other challenges we had in 2020, to have a record homicide year, 103 homicides. It's just terrible. And in the last week of last year, to have 2 senseless homicides here in beautiful Salt Lake City, with almost on New Year's Eve, the 30th, victim Thompson Kamara fall victim in a senseless crime. We just can't have that. And if you even look at the rough sketch of what that pinnacle crime statistic is with homicides, 103, 20 of those occurred in Salt Lake City. 79% of all those homicides involved a firearm. From my count, rough count, at least 14 involved drug trafficking or drug abuse. We know that 2, 3, at least 3, I think, were part of our homeless community here in Salt Lake City. Those are the places where we can start. And the tools that I have as the attorney for the United States of America in the District of Utah, the tools that I have to solve these problems and to make progress is with gun crime statutes and drug trafficking statutes. And I'm not going to, sit in my high chair and think that I know all the answers. I will rely on, and my partners will rely on, Salt Lake City to point to us those community impact cases, those cases that make sense to take to federal court and get meaningful justice. Today, constituents, taxpayers should feel good about what we're announcing. This is a common sense effort by public servants to pool our resources. There's no new money here. How much does this cost? No new money. This is a wise investment and use of taxpayer money that's already there. And for the United States Attorney, the Mayor of Salt Lake City, the Commissioner of the Utah's Department of Public Safety, to partner and work towards a common goal, our constituents should expect no less. We look forward to returning and reporting our progress. We're confident that we will have good news as the year moves forward.
Well, thank you, Mayor Mendenhall and Chief Brown, and I'm grateful for this opportunity to join with you today as we have a very historic welcoming in a brand new year under a great partnership of something that we've already has been established, has been identified before, but yet an opportunity now to have great focus going forward on combating crime and holding people accountable. Part of the slogan for this Utah Department of Public Safety is keeping Utah safe. And as broad as that statement may be for all of Utah, it is no better fit than right here in Salt Lake City with our capital city. And knowing that what we see here within the capital City is exactly what transpires throughout the rest of the state. So part of the Department of Public Safety and as the commissioner, I am very proud to be able to stand here shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm with Chief Brown, with our federal partners. It doesn't matter what this might look like from a federal, a state, or even a local perspective. When it comes to law enforcement, we have to work together. In order for us to be effective, and especially work through several of the challenges that we are seeing, we stand together and we work together, overcoming any divide. And that's what we're committed to here from the state perspective today. And so with that, I welcome this. Just by way of even some of the other crimes that we've seen and even the increase of unaccountability that we've seen in our system. You know, we've seen that over the last couple of years of even the simplest of things, which starts with merely what Utah Highway Patrol does, a lot of traffic violations. An increase of 100-mile-an-hour speeders, for instance. Over the last 3 years, we've seen a 55% increase in that statistic. Well over 5,000 in 2020 of those that have been cited at 100 miles an hour or more. One of the areas we've stood together for a long time is in our impaired driving effort with Salt Lake City. Working the roads and the streets to ensure that those who are impaired do not go down the road and cause further harm. It's been an initiative from day one that we take very serious. And so that morphs simply into also some of these other areas that we see now of street racing. The seriousness and the causes of what street racing does. As innocent that may appear to be on at face value, Chief Brown has laid out all the implications of the crimes that are associated with something that draws hundreds of individuals together to be able to exhibit speed in a way of very unsafe manner and fashion, to the point that we will be working with the legislature this year to be able to address some of those concerns based on some of the that are inhibiting us from being able to make proper arrests and or otherwise action towards street racers. You know, and one of the areas too that I stand here today is to be able to recognize the aspect of the state and the city working together, even through our Operation Rio Grande. And U.S. Attorney Huber mentioned about the Pioneer Park Coalition bringing us together just here a month ago. And we have been in great partnerships with those community aspects from 2017, working with the city to be able to combat some of the issues here that even Mayor Mendenhall recognized and the chief. And so we look to build upon those relationships. We look to build upon our community relationships. We look to be able to enhance the aspect of holding criminals accountable in every which way we can. And as we do that, we call upon our prosecutors, we call upon our court system and all federal partners that we can to be able to continue to help us as well. It is a team effort, and there's no two cents about it. The fact is what we saw last year, understanding the civility of the calls for police reform, we certainly have the ability to make a difference in a positive fashion, in a positive manner, as we move forward with that part of the criminal justice system. So that is our commitment as we look to increase in holding offenders accountable, to overcome the senseless acts of putting people in jail, continuously getting them released, and more victims that continue to fall at the hands of these people that are routine criminals. So with that, Chief and Mayor, thank you, and we appreciate the partnership.
My name is Matt Harris. I'm the United States Marshal for the District of Utah. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief, for inviting me here today. I'm going to talk a little bit about fugitive apprehension and violent crime in Utah. The United States Marshal Service is the oldest law enforcement agency in our country. Our primary mission, our primary enforcement mission, is to help state and local departments enforce violent crime in their communities. We do that by partnering with our local law enforcement partners. And together we apprehend the most violent criminals in our community. Our task force comprises of 25 state and local agencies and over 90 deputized U.S. Marshals around the state. Over 70% of our work are state and local warrants. The U.S. Marshal Service has only 5% of the United States Department of Justice's employees, but we arrest over 50% of the people that the Department of Justice arrests. The impact that our task force has on violent crime and keeping crime low in Utah is immeasurable. The last 3 years, our Violent Fugitive Task Force has arrested over 2,500 fugitives here in Utah and over 500 in the streets of Salt Lake City. In the previous year, we've seen a rise in homicides, robberies, sexual assault cases that have been referred to us. And while this is somewhat routine to us, it's not routine anymore, and we're seeing something that we haven't seen before. The criminals are increasingly brazen. The criminals are increasingly carrying firearms in the commission of their crimes. We're seeing firearms stolen from vehicles and from homes because sometimes our citizens are not cautious in protecting those weapons. The issue we have here in Utah is not specific to us. It's a problem we're seeing around the nation. But what is unique is that we have a United States attorney and federal partners who understand the importance of local relationships, and we have local partners who see the value of bringing federal agencies into the mix. The best way to disrupt violent crime is to do it collectively, leveraging federal resources with state and local partnerships, both federal and local law enforcement, and also politicians, city leaders, civic leaders. There is no us versus them, there is just an us. But employing this new strategy requires some self-reflection on how we got here and why we are here. I'm often perplexed at how many repeat offenders we see. I send a task force out several nights a week, 15, 20 guys to make an arrest, guy's booked in jail, and the next day he's out. It's mind-boggling, and that has to stop. Simply, many criminals that we apprehend have no business running around in our community. But laws such as no bail pretrial release sometimes allow it. Research in criminal justice, as our U.S. attorney said, tells us that a small percentage of criminals commit a large percentage of crimes. Presently here in Utah, there are over 2,000 warrants in the National Crime Information Center database, and over 260 warrants that are issued from Salt Lake City. What I'm seeing around the state is our local departments, and even here in Salt Lake City, are becoming inundated with new crimes. And what happens is detectives and investigators investigate crimes, and then that crime that happened 2 weeks ago falls by the wayside because new crimes are being committed. That's where we come in. And what I'm recommending to help this problem is to utilize our federal task force, to utilize the U.S. Marshal Service in helping clean up the warrants that Salt Lake City has. I've talked to Chief Brown about that a little bit. What we'll bring is our expertise, our technology, our manpower, and our ability to find fugitives that are hiding in our neighborhoods. Salt Lake City is a special place. It's our capital. It's a city of first impression when people from around the world come to Utah. I'm committed to this partnership and this initiative and to help Salt Lake City ensure that this city remains the vibrant, safe, and industrious city that it is, because the people in our community deserve an all-hands-on-deck approach to fighting crime. Thanks for your time, Mayor and Chief.
We'll open it to questions for a moment.
So, from what you're saying, it sounds like you're doing a good job arresting people, but you can't hold them in jail. So is this more of a jail problem? Are we back to that again? Or how much is the jail and corrections playing a part of this?
Do you want me to take a go? This is really, you can clean up. Okay. There are police resource limitations as well in Salt Lake City and across the state, across the nation, I'm sure, as our own officers face COVID exposures, and we have the normal attrition that's happened and some elevated attrition in the last couple of months. So there are local resource conversations that we are actively having with our city council to make sure that we can keep bringing on classes of officers, as we did at the beginning of November with 18 new officers coming onto the force, and we have more in training at the moment. That's at the local level. We are then, when arrests are being made, everything that they've talked about is really these federal level crimes. A lot of the street crime that we see is misdemeanors, and none of that, not a single misdemeanor, is being accepted at the Salt Lake County Jail. It hasn't been for a long time, for most of 2020. So when we talk about drug use on the streets, prostitution, now I'm getting into legal waters when there's attorneys here who can answer those questions better. We can't book people. Salt Lake County Jail won't take them. So what we're talking about are felonies, federal level crimes, and even then, as with the single case that Chief put up on the board, we take felonies to the jail, and at most, maybe 5 days, but on average, it's really a matter of hours that they're in jail. So working with these state and federal partners who have resources and access to other jails throughout the state and possibly beyond the state of Utah, they have the resources to book these apex criminals and hold them until they can go to trial. Now clean up after me. Did I get it all right?
That's kind of your wheelhouse. Yeah, no, Mayor, you did a great job. Pat, it's a yes and yes question. I mean, yeah, COVID's played a huge impact on the jail population, but so has bail reform and no bail issues and things that we need to really start looking at. And as we talked about, there are more partners than you see here today. There are prosecutors, there are judges, there are courts, there are corrections. All of us need to come together. And as we move forward, I think you'll see new partners here. But the one thing that the U.S. Marshals brings, and Matt, you may want to come talk about it because this is your wheelhouse, is that they have the ability, once John has taken a case and decided to prosecute it federally, that becomes a federal arrestee. Matt, you want to talk about your capabilities?
Sure. So as a U.S. Marshal, we have over 600 federal prisoners here in Utah. And what happens is, once John's folks decide to take a case, that person becomes a federal prisoner in federal custody and in the custody of the United States Marshal Service. No longer do we have to worry about whether that person is going to be released from different county jails. In the federal system, there is a detention or there's release. And we have great judges and we have great prosecutors, and generally, if folks are being charged federally, it's a judicial crime and those people are likely remaining locked up. It's my responsibility and the responsibility of my staff to find different housing options, to have these people housed somewhere here in Utah until they go through the entirety of the criminal process. Once that happens and once that person is charged and sentenced, we take those prisoners and we send them to a Bureau of Prison facility for the remainder of their sentence. So that's kind of how it works.
So in summary, is the, solution to violent crime in Salt Lake City, more federal charges are going to be coming in 2021?
Yes. Yeah, we're going to use the federal system.
And because we, on our task force, we see these cases over and over and over again. And I've had to make a determination to tell my staff, hey, we're not going to spend time on this person if they're going to be out tomorrow. That puts officers at risk. It puts everybody at risk when we go and we serve a large amount of warrants and that person is released the next day. So we need another option.
Yeah, sure.
So in answer to the question, are we going to see more federal cases coming out of Salt Lake City? The answer is simply yes. We have excellent prosecutors in my office. We have worked together already based on the conversations I've had with the Pioneer Park Coalition and with the Salt Lake City Mayor and her staff members. We are committed, and we have the resources for the foreseeable future to bring appropriate cases for meaningful justice. When I say meaningful justice, I'm not talking about catch and release. I'm not talking about hours and days and in months. I'm talking about years in federal prison that matches the seriousness of the crime. It's a faraway federal prison, as Marshal Harris talked about, there's no federal prison in the state of Utah. These people will be exported away from here and give some respite to the law-abiding community of Salt Lake City. So yeah, we will bring more. And it's not just the partners here, as the chief mentioned. I have had, I've talked with the other federal lead agencies. So we're talking about Homeland Security investigations. We're talking about the Drug Enforcement Administration and FBI and the ATF are all committed and anxious to start helping the mayor and her city work on this problem of chronic lawlessness. We've got to start somewhere, and this is a great place to start.
Yes, so can you anticipate what charges, drug trafficking, habitual offender, how do you see federal
Yeah,
prosecution working?
the bread and butter charges that we have are people who are possessing firearms who have no business possessing firearms. Multiple time convicted felons, domestic violence, misdemeanors, protective orders with a gun, illegal aliens with a gun, having a gun while you're dealing drugs. These are our bread and butter cases that bring on average a sentence of 3 to 5 years for simply possessing a firearm when you can't lawfully do that. We also have the drug trafficking statutes, and as you know and report, typically we go after organizations. We try to get back to the cartels in Mexico who are dumping this poison in our communities in Salt Lake City neighborhoods by the boatload. That's what we normally focus on, and we will continue to focus on that. But when I say community impact case, that's maybe code. Let me be more, not so subtle. If detectives at Salt Lake City or task force officers that they have associated with our Metro Narcotics Task Force right up the street, which is led by Salt Lake City, by the way, the task force commander, if they come to my prosecutors and say, hey, this guy, maybe it's a low level of drugs, but he's distributing drugs on the street. He's distributing drugs in the homeless camp. He's distributing drugs in a neighborhood on the south side of Salt Lake City. And typically, maybe that's a case we're not interested in because we're looking at the cartel cases, but if a detective comes to me from Salt Lake City and says, this is a community impact case, we need meaningful justice because this guy will not stop. That's a case we'll take in 2021 in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Just to follow up on that, we have in 2020 made a number of arrests of individuals that have a lot of dope that they're selling, and they're in possession of firearms, and they're restricted persons. We've arrested them, we've put them in jail, only to see them back on the street again. So really, we're calling an audible, we're kind of going a different play, and we're going to go with these federal charges and these federal for these crimes that are being committed over and over and over in Salt Lake City.
I wanna re-emphasize what Attorney Huber was saying about these community impact crimes. And he listed a great many different crimes that his office can focus on, those bread and butter crimes. But as he mentioned in his previous time at the mic, that we'll be focusing on those community impact crimes and working specifically with Salt Lake City's detectives. So some of those that clearly could escalate to the level that his office would have interest, but are not community impacted. They're not impacting the quality of life of our residents and our businesses throughout Salt Lake City. They're not likely to be elevated through this process that we're doing, really taking a focused approach. Peyton?
Yeah. So there have been, like 57 resignations from Salt Lake City PD this year. A lot of detectives, I think 20 of them moved over to patrol. Do you see this federal partnership as a way to maybe alleviate some of their caseload, since they're going to be fewer detectives? Is this the work they would normally be doing, or is this related to anything?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Absolutely. Putting people back to patrol, first we have to answer those calls for service. And we have, that's the backbone of any police organization is patrol. And so we're going to put more people into patrol so that we can fill up the beats, the communities of Salt Lake City. Everybody deserves to have a police officer in their neighborhood. But it's also a proven fact that just the presence of an officer, either making traffic stops like Commissioner Anderson was talking about, or just driving through the area, reduces crime. So that will help, but yeah, we're hoping that as we catch some of these apex criminals, the ones that are habitually reoffending, that the caseload for detectives will go down. Absolutely.
Okay, one more. We've just been so thorough. If you don't have any for us.
You had mentioned like street racing as being one of the things that, is kind of an incubator for some of these crimes. Are there any other things you can point to?
Well, I want to take the first stab at that. The street racing community that has evolved and grown dramatically in the west industrial areas of Salt Lake City, I don't think is necessarily an incubator for those federal crimes that we're talking about on the community impact level, although there are absolutely community impact crimes happening within that environment. There's people with who are restricted, who have weapons on them. There are sale of weapons happening. There is drug sales happening. There's drug use happening. There have been multiple shootings in those street racing environments, and it's been very compromising for those businesses, many of which operate on a 24/7 cycle. And so as they have employees, providers, distributors coming and going from those industrial facilities, and there are hundreds of people descending on their property and gathering in their parking lots and then racing on their streets, it's not just impeding the flow of commerce in the area, it's a dramatic threat on the employees in that area. So I don't think that we mean to say that that's the incubator for the crimes we're seeing in other parts of the city.
You hit that one out of the park here.
All right. Okay,
But
thanks
is this
everyone.
Something like drugs or gangs pushing the uptick in crime?
I'm sorry, Pat?
So I guess going off her question, what is pushing the uptick in violent crime? Is it drugs? Is it gangs? Can you point to one thing that's causing all the increase in crime?
I don't think we can point to any one thing, but I think the lack of accountability for individuals in our community, knowing that there is no recourse, there's no timeout for bad behavior, is perpetuating that violent crime. And so that's the message today. With this task force and these partnerships under the leadership of Mayor Mendenhall, we're putting our foot down. It's going to be a new game here in Salt Lake City.
Thanks everybody.